let's talk about the Good Folks Espresso blend. I'm actually drinking it right now and kind of give you my insights into this coffee. If you notice from the image, I gave this a 3 stars out of 5. So let's first talk about how I prepared and how I brewed this coffee. Again, always using my trusty Rancilio with my Barazza Forte with its flat burr grinder. I'm using a 18.5 gram VST portafilter. Always kind of start with my base recipe unless the roaster recommends something different. So I always start with 18.5 grams in, 36 grams out at about 24-25 seconds. And then a lot of times I'll also make sure that even with my base recipe, if the roaster doesn't recommend a certain recipe, I'll check on this trusty VST to make sure we're still getting roughly pretty close to that 20% extraction mark, and if I need to adjust the grind or get it kind of close. Again, I know I used to give a lot of details on the numbers with this VST, but then after talking to people I realized unless you own a cafe or you're super geeky about coffee like me, you're not going to have one of these. So I'm not going to share those numbers with you, the parameters. If you're interested, just shoot me an email. I'd be happy to share them with you. But again, it just gives me a way to be fair to every coffee that I taste and review. So with this coffee, again, no brew parameters on Good Folks website. And actually the description on their espresso versus what's on the label was also a little bit different. So on their website, I believe they said it was like semi-sweet. In this case, with my base recipe at about 20% extraction. Again, if you're not sure, 20% is kind of the gold standard of extraction. That's kind of what everybody shoots for. I think I was getting like 19.78% at my base recipe, which again is 18.5 grams in, 36 out at roughly 24-25 seconds, kind of give or take a few seconds here or there. Again, and then with the cappuccino, because I never really drank straight espresso, because for me, an espresso really shines when it's blended with milk. So I always use 160 grams of the Pacific Series oat milk. So it's a Barista Series oat milk made by Pacific Foods, and I always use that 160 grams in. So again, I just try to limit as many variables as possible so that it's always the same, and really the only thing that's changing is the coffee itself. Okay, so let's talk about how the espresso tastes. Again, previously I talked about the brew method I used. I did try a ristretto shot, and I also tried a longo ristretto, 18.5 in, 18.5 out, at about, again, 25-30 seconds to kind of really push a shorter shot. And then longo, I pushed it to about 42 grams as opposed to 36. Again, around that 25-26 second mark. Base recipe was kind of the best here. At 18.5 grams, it didn't really shine in the milk. You couldn't really taste it. You kind of tasted more of the milk. And then the longo, it just got too bright, too acidic, not enough base in the espresso. So again, kind of that tried and true recipe of 18.5 grams in, 36 grams out at around 24-25 seconds, 19.75% extraction was kind of the best flavor profile of espresso. So again, why did I give it a 3? Again, when I've had espressos, like I've reviewed before, one of those being Tony's Espresso out of Washington, Bellingham, Washington, I believe, and then Square One Coffee out, they have a Thaddeus espresso blend, and they're somewhere in the Midwest, I can't remember offhand, but both of those espressos are some of the best that I've had. So let's talk about what I think makes a really, really good espresso. So a good espresso should have a nice chocolatey base. And here they're selling you on that chocolatey base and then a maple syrup kind of finish. So for them, what's going to cut through the milk as far as sweetness goes is more of a maple syrup flavor. So sweet, but kind of that very nutty, woodsy flavor. I mean, think about maple syrup. And then chocolate, we all kind of know what chocolate is. It should kind of have that. For me, chocolate should really be the base. Like a good Brazilian in a blend will give you that really good nutty chocolatey base, and then you can add another coffee on top to give you whatever sweetness you have. Here there just wasn't much base, so that's why I give it a 3. it didn't have that good cocoa syrupy flavor that really sets the tone for the espresso and gives it that, again, kind of like biting into a chocolate bar mouthfeel and taste, and then having another coffee shine through in the sweetness to kind of finish the palate and make it more complex and unique. Really, all I kind of get is this maple syrupy sweetness. I couldn't find anything on their website as to what the blend was, so I'm not sure what coffees they're using. They don't share any of that information. Again, I think this bag I paid retail, I think after shipping it was like $18.50 or something. So again, still up there in the third wave specialty coffee market. Again, great espresso, way better than the Green Mermaid for sure, but when we're just trying to look for that perfect espresso amongst the world's best roasters, this one falls about in the middle, about a 3-star. So again, really good coffee, just nothing to really write home about. Really, really good. If they were my local coffee shop and I lived in Louisville, I'd probably visit there frequently. But again, not world class. And that's kind of what we're looking for here. So again, not much chocolate base, a lot of that maple syrup sweetness that kind of comes through, gives it a little bit more acidity from start to finish, rather than kind of finishing with that complexity and acidity, just kind of lacks the base. So let's talk about a few of my reasons why I think maybe this coffee isn't quite as advertised with the chocolatey base. And I think there are a couple of things with that. One, it could be whatever coffee they're using as their base coffee. Rather than using like a Colombian, you can get some really good Colombians that have a really nice chocolatey, nutty base. And of course, Brazil is kind of the champion of those coffees. India, also, if you're in Australia and a lot of those regions, India is kind of the Brazil for Australia. So they make a lot of those great think about a really good Sumatran coffee that you had from Asia. It's got that very nutty, earthy kind of flavor. Sumatras really aren't my thing, but I have had some coffees with an Indian coffee as a base, and it was pretty fantastic. So here, I'm not sure, maybe they're using something like a Colombian or a Guatemalan or another Central American coffee that's a little bit more complex. So it gives you kind of some more of those floral notes that come through, as opposed to being just kind of that full-bodied nuts and cocoa. You know, think about a chocolate-covered M&M or something like that. Just not getting that here. The other thing I noticed is when I looked at the development of the coffee, I broke up into quite a few beans. And what I noticed is that in the inside, so if you think about a steak, generally when you're cooking a steak, you know, you want that sear on the outside, and that generally gets really red towards the middle, and then it kind of fades back to dark, and it gets that dark sear on the outside. Well, with coffee, we're kind of also analyzing it like a steak, but what we're looking for is complete evenness from top to bottom. So imagine you took a really nice steak, stuck it in a sous vide, and a sous vide is a way to cook things, and it just creates a perfect temperature all the way through. So you're not going to have any difference in temperature. It's going to be one temperature all the way through. That's what we're looking for in a good coffee. That's what makes great development of the flavors, and it really allows it to kind of brew more evenly and not give you any off flavors. What I noticed on most of their coffee, most of the beans that I split open, and I'll post a picture here so you can see it, is that on the inside of the coffee, in the middle, it's dark, and then it gets a little bit lighter towards the outside. So you kind of got this sharp inside middle, and then outside darkness. And I was recently talking with a good friend of mine who's roasting, and he just sourced a coffee, and he was having problems really getting good development out of it, and we saw the same thing. So we were seeing really dark in the middle, kind of fading to light on the outside. So generally, when a coffee bean cracks, it releases a lot of moisture that's stored inside that bean, and then it allows heat to kind of zap it. And so generally when you're watching your roast profile on a roaster, you'll kind of see this flat line. Like the coffee almost like looks like it's flatlining, your rate of rise isn't continuing, the temperature of the coffee kind of flatlines. So essentially you're having all this moisture release, and then all the heat's just zapping the inside, because now it's no longer has this moisture protecting it, and it can kind of bake it from the inside. So and I don't know this is for sure, this is just a theory that we were kind of tossing around, is it could potentially be the coffee at origin wasn't dried evenly. So you have coffee that's not like on raised drying beds or big concrete patios where it allows for a more even drying process. So you get coffees that have some moisture more than others. And what happens is the coffees that have more moisture inside, it takes longer for them to release all that moisture and to get more coffee or to get more heat to the inside. But the others that have less moisture trapped on the inside releases it really quickly. And so you've got this mix. You've got a little bit of moisture coming out of some coffee, a lot of moisture coming out of another. And so you have some coffee that's just baking. It's getting really, really hot on the inside because now it's an evaporative process, right? So think when you sweat, when you're on the bike, you're climbing a hill, you're sweating, and you have this evaporative process that's helping to cool you down. So same kind of thing is happening, and it results in this internal baking thing. Now again, that's just a theory. By no means am I an amazing roaster, and I have a really hard time achieving that perfect even roast profile on my little home roaster. So even on some nicer roasters, it can be really hard to also control that heat and keep it so that you get this perfect roast, this perfect temperature from start to finish on your coffee, even on some pretty quality roasters for a more commercial grade. So again, I don't know what they're roasting on. I don't know anything about them. I just bought their coffee, I'd heard about them, and so we're just talking about it. But again, I did notice that kind of baking on the inside to kind of thinning on the outside. So this could mean that our drop temperature was at a good medium roast, but we just lacked the development because we're getting just some of that baking on the inside. So we're not developing the outside as much, and so we're not getting that full complex cocoa sweetness. So I think it's a combination of the two things that lack to the body in this coffee. If I had to guess, it would be one, whatever the coffee that they sourced as the base is maybe a little bit too complex to be a base, as opposed to that kind of traditional nutty Brazilian or even Colombians that have that really heavy nutty flavor, or cocoa flavor, I should say, more accurately, or even like some Indians or Sumatrans. And they went with maybe a Costa Rican that has that base and is present, but is a little bit more complex, floral, and sweet. And so then when you combine it with whatever coffee that they used in the blend to create that sweetness, it's just too much sweetness and not enough base, and kind of gives you a more acidic coffee. So for somebody that's not familiar with coffee and you went into the cafe, I think this would present two things. If you're not familiar with coffee, you think the cup is really bitter because it's really acidic. So it's not necessarily bitter, but it's really acidic. And so that acidicness is kind of sharp on the tongue. And so if you walked in, you'd be like, wow, this is really acidic. There's definitely no presence of ash or roast in the flavor profile. So for somebody that is used to that roasty, ashy flavor, all they're going to taste is acid. And so for most people that are new to specialty coffee, I think it's really important to have a really solid base in your espresso because it creates a really even, smooth transition to the acidity and just creates an amazing espresso or cappuccino. And let's face it, most people are drinking lattes. So and most people don't drink cappuccinos. So again, when you have less milk to mask that acidity, you really need that base to come through. And so for somebody that isn't familiar with coffee, again, it might just come off as overly bitter, but again, it's just really acidic because we have a lot of that sweetness cutting through, no roasty or ashy notes coming in to kind of mask that acidity. So again, I would give this one 3, still a really solid cup of coffee, great espresso, but again, about middle of the road for most of your specialty grade coffee roasters. All right, guys, so that wraps up another new Espresso Week. Again, we talked about Good Folks Coffee Company. If you'd like to check them out, just Google Good Folks Coffee. I think it's actually goodfolkscoffee.com. Check out their Fast Track Espresso blend. We'd love to hear your brew parameters if you're able to get something different from it. If you thought it was maybe something a little bit better. But again, definitely check them out. Again, they don't pay me to review this. I don't get any kickback if you go order this coffee. Again, just trying to find some great people doing great things with coffee and help you get a little bit more caffeine on your bike rides. So if you like what I'm doing and you like what I'm doing here and you just want really good coffee on the bike, please go to bikealateco.com and you can just help support me by buying our pre-ride cold brew, all roasted by our good friends at Two Rivers Craft Coffee in Arvada. High quality coffee, cold brewed for 24 hours, blended with just the right amount of carbohydrates to get your fill to get over the hill.